So thank you very much, Abbot Mark, and I'd just like to say a huge thank you to Abbot Mark, the Worth monks, for welcoming us today, and also the hospitality team. It's wonderful to be here. And so happy feast of St Benedict! It's a great day, and we're here, all of us, which is wonderful. It's wonderful to have Abbot Jeremias here. Thanks to Abbot Mark, I got into contact with Abbot Jeremias in October. I asked him if he'd like to come and speak for St Benedict Week. I got back a positive response from Abbot Jeremias. And then there's no such thing as a free lunch. You know, when the Abbot Primate says, yes, I'll come, he also says, but I'd like to do a study day. So that's why we're here today. We're here. And isn't it wonderful that we're able to listen to each other and to share our thoughts with Abbot Jeremias, who is in the process of planning a jubilee in 2029, a jubilee of Benedictine life. And so that's what today is all about. It's about listening to what all of us say and to what the Holy Spirit is saying in preparation for that jubilee. We are very diverse today. We are 15 different communities from across the UK and Ireland. Big shout out to Carmel Abbey. We've got Ireland represented here. I got told off by Liz at the beginning when there was UK was appearing in various documents I was writing. Don't forget Ireland as well. It's wonderful. They recently joined the EBC, and so it's wonderful that they've come all the way over from Ireland to us today. We are lay people, monks, nuns, oblates, and we are ecumenical, which is wonderful. St Benedict reaches out to all. We have, in our lay community, we have many members of the community who come from different denominations. And today, we represent that diversity, which is wonderful. We have Benedictines, we have Cistercians, so all one big family who follow the rule of St Benedict. So today we have those different families represented. We also have education, Benedictine education represented with Andre, who's here, who's written a marvellous book about Benedictine education. So it's wonderful that he's here. We have a luminary of us. We have Esther, who is, we're so delighted, Esther, that you could join us. And so thank you very much for coming today. And I have apologies from two people. I'm very sad they're not here. So Ed and Jessica, you'll see their faces on there. They are the curators of an exhibition which is taking place from May to October next year at the University of East Anglia in the Sainsbury Centre. It's the first time there's been a medieval exhibition in UEA in the Sainsbury Centre since 1980. It's dedicated to the rule of St Benedict. And for those of you who are interested to know more, I've actually printed off their guide to what this is going to be. They're going to have some marvellous artefacts there, including the Hatton Codex of the Rule of St Benedict, the oldest existing Rule of St Benedict, which comes from the Bodleian Library. It will be on loan, and there'll be other wonderful artefacts. They're trying to mirror artefacts from, let's say, ancient monasteries with modern art, and also trying to bring out what living by rules means. So they send their apologies. They both got sick. They went off to Antwerp last week for a family party, so they're not here. We have the Catholic Union here, and they are celebrating their summer gathering tomorrow in Worth, and it's wonderful that they're here. And, you know, in the original conception of Abbot Jeremias coming, I always thought it would be really important that we reach out in the secular world. Because the people who are in the Catholic Union are politicians, civil servants, educators, people who are actually in the forefront of living lay Christian lives. And the message of St Benedict is not just about religion, it's about our society, it's about how we impact our society. So I was very keen the Catholic Union would be involved, and when I rang up Louisa, who's going to be here tomorrow, and I said, we'd love you to be there for Abbot Jeremias. She said to me, we're having our summer gathering at Worth. So there's some great plan there which is happening. It was a bit of an extraordinary coincidence. They happen to have some gathering here. So Karen and Santana, it's lovely that you're here. And of course, Sheila has two hats because she's president of the Catholic Union as well as a member of the lay community. So all of that is just so that we get to know each other. Please, we've got badges, you've got photos, use today to get to know each other. We're going to have breakout groups, we're going to have the time for Lectio, when we're going to go off and do an Emmaus walk, and we'll do that in threes. So pick someone you don't know. Preferably, maybe try and get with someone from the lay community or worse, so that you don't wander off into the wrong places, as Pete said at the beginning. So, just to introduce the spirit of today. Today is a Benedictine study day. And, you know, we've heard a lot about synodality since Pope Francis introduced the idea of synodality, but I think that the rules in Benedict predated synodality by a long time, because the heart of the rule is about listening. So today is really about a day of listening and engaging with each other, engaging with the Holy Spirit, asking the Holy Spirit to come and guide us and help guide Abbot Jeremias in his plans. The best news, there's no PowerPoint. No death by PowerPoint. Abbot Jeremias, when he speaks, is going to engage directly with you. You're not going to be looking up at something, you're just going to be looking at Abbot Jeremias. Isn't that wonderful? No PowerPoint. But that is a symbol, I think, of the spirit of today. Listen, work, pray. That's what we're going to do today. So it is my great pleasure to introduce Abbot Jeremias. Some of you may know that as a result of the St Benedict Week invitation, I'm now doing a little job for Abbot Jeremias. And so it's a great pleasure. I'm introducing my boss, actually. But no, I have been so, it's been such a wonderful encounter to meet Jeremias. He's very, very wonderful at listening and engaging and making people feel very just relaxed. And I think that he is a great inspiration. So I'm really looking forward now to hearing Jeremias talk about the 2029 project and to share his vision with you. And that vision which he's going to share with us is going to be very much part of the breakout group. And the breakout group, we're going to be asking ourselves questions in that breakout group. What does the title, Places of Hope, Locus Christi, Places of Hope, bring to mind? What would you like to celebrate in 2029 for the Jubilee of Benedictine life? And are there any challenges which you can anticipate? So I will repeat those at the end, but this is just so you have that in mind. This is what we're going to be reflecting on after Abbot Jeremias has given us his input. Then after that we have Lectio, which is on the wedding feast of Cana, after which we will have lunch. So, Abbot Jeremias.
I stand in front of the PowerPoint yesterday and talked me out of the PowerPoint, but that's fine. Thank you very much for this enthusiastic welcome. Enthusiasm is a hallmark of Adam. I've noticed that already. A few times when he sort of drafted little notes from me, I said, remember, I'm a German, we don't do superlatives. I'm really glad to be here. When I see how this has been prepared, I think you've been running with this half idea that I gave you and turned it into something marvelous and very impressive. So I believe this is going to be useful and good and enriching for all of you, but you have been co-opted as the think tank of our Jubilee project now. So I'm sure we're going to take home some stuff back to Rome that's going to be helpful, useful, fruitful. I'm supposed to talk 25 minutes or something like that. Yes, we'll see where that goes. Jubilees. Yesterday evening we talked about jubilees here in the Calefactory when the monks had recreation. And as we have a few more mature members here in the community, the Jubilee of 1980 was remembered by some, especially then, to my great surprise, Father Patrick, I don't know if you know this, said, oh yes, I was the coordinator of that Jubilee. And he had been involved in the big liturgy in London, the Vespers, where I think half of all English monks and nuns turned up for solemn Vespers. The 1980 Jubilee, I'm too young, I joined monastic life in 1984, but I still knew some of the legacy projects of that Jubilee. The book, Consider Your Call, which was drafted with the help of, was it Abbot Victor? Yes, Abbot Victor here of Worth, as well as I remember Alan Rees. Daniel Rees was involved. Another book that came out in the United States, the edition of the Rule of St Benedict that's used at least on the other side of the Atlantic up to today. The RB 1980 was created in the context of that Jubilee. So really, we still remember that. We slightly older people still remember that Jubilee as having left quite a mark on Benedictine life. That was the anniversary, the 1500th anniversary of the birth of St Benedict. Even more important was the 1880 Jubilee, I think. The 1880 Jubilee gave rise to the first attempt to really create a book that has the names of all the Benedictine monks in the world. It was the Arch-Abbot of St. Vincent in the United States. Perhaps because he was so far away from what's happening here in the continent, and he had this idea of creating the Album Benedictinum, as it was called at the time, the forerunner, or really the first edition of the Catalogus that we still produce every 5 years, which is the one book that sort of expresses or embodies the idea that we are one big family. And then they had a Jubilee in Rome and in Monte Cassino, which brought together lots of abbots for the first time really, probably since the 15th century, when lots of abbots came together for the Council of Constance. And when many people come together, sometimes creative things happen. And so it was around that time when the idea slowly emerged that it would not be a bad idea if the Benedictines that had no central structure whatsoever could express their being a family, could live that in a more structured way. And Pope Leo XIII embraced that idea, put a cardinal in charge to promote it, and a few years later the Benedictine Confederation was created, the office of the Abbot Primate was created, and St. Anselmo is a place where the youth of our order can come together. So all these are, in a way, distant fruits of the 1880 Jubilee. So these Jubilees are not just occasions for having a nice cake. They do leave, if they're well done, a lasting mark on how we live. And that's been a little bit the background for starting to talk and to think about this 2029 Jubilee. We celebrate the fact that in 529, according to the traditional chronology, Monte Cassino was established. And when we discussed this last September at the Congress of Abbots, the abbots came round to the idea that we should really do this. We should usurp that Jubilee. Not quite, but make it more than just the Jubilee of Monte Cassino. Make it a Jubilee of Benedictine life. That was sort of what we came up with. One of the abbots said, let's make it a Jubilee of the Rule of St. Benedict. At the end we settled for Benedictine life. We are going to celebrate 1.5 millennia of Benedictine life. And that was one basic decision. It should be celebrated by our whole worldwide Benedictine family. And number two, it should not be something which we mischievously called an Italian Jubilee, Italian style Jubilee. So the idea was an Italian Jubilee means a beautiful mass with a cardinal or maybe the Pope, one or two interesting keynote speeches, and a big festive lunch. That's the Italian idea of a Jubilee. It's a caricature of the Italian idea of a Jubilee. We said that's not what we want. we do want to have an in-depth preparation, something that is really, not preparation, reflection, something that really celebrates our past, and as you know, there is lots to celebrate there. We do pride on history, we do very well as Benedictines, but also look at our current reality, which sometimes is quite humble, and finally really look into the future. Try to be bold and think what can be the role of monasticism, but also the role of St. Benedict, of the rule of all those who are inspired by St. Benedict. What can be their role, our role, for our church and our society in the future? And all that sounded very convincing, and practically unanimously the Abbots Congress voted in favor of this jubilee, and I was very happy. And then, when they all left, and I was in Rome now, recently, just elected at that same Congress, elected Abbot Primate, I realized this is not just a great idea, it's also a lot of work. And especially as we said, this should be celebrated on a global scale, I really started to tremble and think, how can this possibly be done? And that's in a way when Abbot Mark and somehow also Abbot Christopher brought me into touch with Adam, and I realized there's somebody there who is very inspired by St. Benedict, has a lot of organizational experience, and is just going to go into early retirement. I thought it's a real possibility there, and so he and Patricia have been now several times to Rome, and we have started to work. And anyway, this is why we're here today. Basically, trying to give shape, trying to find ways, trying to not just shape, but also to distill the ideas, the themes that we are going to live, to celebrate, to develop during this jubilee. Once, also through the help of Abbot Christopher, I was able to take a course with, what's her name? Karen Vanstone. And I learned by listening to her that I always do things the wrong way. I start with the pragmatic stuff and the practicalities. At the very end, I may have a big idea. And she said, no, you should do it the other way around. You try to have a big idea first. And then go into the implementation. Anyway, I'll tell you the way I'm built, the way we do it. Principles. I think we have 3 principles for this jubilee. I call them principles now. The working title, you see it maybe in the document, is Locus Iste, Places of Hope since 529. A Jubilee of Benedictine Monasticism. That's quite a mouthful as a title. And we're still working with some knowledgeable people to see if this can be fine-tuned or sharpened or in any way made more impactful. But basically that's what we're working with right now. Locus Iste, Places of Hope. It's a Jubilee. We are going to look into the past, of course. And we are going to celebrate that. And some of the great contributions which St. Benedict has made to life in the church, in the world, in a special sense also to Europe. And as you know, England has a privileged place in that history of the rule developing its impact on the world. The oldest manuscript was just mentioned, and it sits in England. The oldest manuscript of the Rule of St. Benedict sits in the Bodleian Library. We are going to look at the present, we are going to look at the future. It's going to be a decentralized jubilee. There will be some keynote events in Italy, surely San Anselmo and Monte Cassino, but we hope that big things will happen all over the world. Just like the 1980 Jubilee had one of its biggest events here in Westminster, we hope once again Britain, England, as well as many other countries where Benedictines historically and currently play a role, are going to be places which develop their own way of celebrating this Jubilee. We want congregations, monastic congregations to buy in, countries, regional associations. Obviously the oblates will play an important part in this, lay communities, the monasteries themselves as the central hubs of many of these events. But we want them to be creative. We're not going to tell people what to do. We are going to provide some resources, some materials we're working on. Branding, platforms, name, title, logo, colors, name it, ideas, themes you can work and run with, but there will be no censorship. we are happy with anybody who comes up with the idea that he can connect with the Jubilee of this 1,500 years of Benedictine life. We've already had some good feedback from some museums and libraries. You know, we tell them, I mean, you stole all these Benedictine objects in the past. Make a nice exhibition now. Pay back something to the general society and to us by doing something on your own. And some of them react very positively already. I had good feedback from the Vatican Library, for example. And from some codices may have been legally obtained. I don't know. But there's going to be, in that sense, a lot of subsidiarity. We really want things to happen locally. We are not going to have a centrally controlled Jubilee. We are going to offer resources from the Benedictine Confederation and then hope that beautiful things happen. And like the 1880 and the 1980 Jubilee, we hope there's going to be some lasting legacy, that there will be, I call them products now, there will be things happening that really will remain. We've created a scientific, or we are about to create a scientific committee that is going to supervise some work in the area of scholarship. The dialogues of St Benedict need some editing, in the sense of historical critical editing, translations, commentaries. It has been suggested to us that the martyrology of the Benedictine order is very much called for. The last comprehensive one was published more than 100 years ago. It is a 4-volume book with all Benedictine saints. 2 or 3 more have lived since. So, and to have an updated version of a martyrology that allows us to talk about Benedictine holiness and even to celebrate it by, as we do in many monasteries, reading the martyrology at meals. We hope that something like this can be brought to life. There is a brilliant idea, very ambitious, so I wonder a little bit whether it can actually happen. It comes from the librarian of St Anselmo. We should create an online library of the most important Benedictine texts, not just the 3 or 4 that everybody knows, but there are tons of important, relevant publications produced by the Moorists in the 17th, 18th century, for example, that are barely accessible nowadays, and make all that rich material available easily for everybody who is interested. That will be a question both of publishing, online publishing, as well as possibly translations and so on. Maybe a beautiful Benedictine library can be created, a virtual library in that sense. It's one of the many ideas for legacy projects that we hope we can start to implement in the run-up to this Jubilee. So those 3 principles: a reflection, where we stand, where we go in future, where we come from. It will be very decentralized, it should happen everywhere, and we hope there'll be a real legacy. It will be projected into time. I want to mention a few elements that resonate with me in a special way when I talk and think and dream about this Jubilee. The dreams are not just vision dreams, sometimes they are little nightmares. I think of all the work that needs to be done. The title is maybe a little bit odd. Locus Iste recalls the antiphon of the dedication of the church, the Mass of the dedication of the church, which continues terribilis est. This place is awe-inspiring, would be the correct translation, I think. But we are actually thinking of the Bruckner motet. Locus iste a Deodatus est. It's a place given by God. And it's a beautiful tune too. But I've lived in Austria, I'm a bit partial. And then we say places of hope since 529. So twice in the title we emphasize the place. I think that's significant because really monasteries are essentially places that are being transformed by communities that live there, by people that go there, by pilgrims. They are enriched and transformed and impregnated by that prayer, by that work, by those visits. And it's a little bit against the culture of the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church is conceived as a beautiful kingdom of God with a territorial structure. You have a pope in charge of the whole world. Then you have bishops' conferences and ecclesiastical provinces. Then you have dioceses and deaneries, and finally you have parishes, and everybody belongs to a parish. Depending on where he lives, it's a territory that's administered. That's the traditional way of conceiving the Catholic Church. This system is collapsing in many parts of the world. I don't know too much how you live now in the UK. I can tell you where I come from, Catholic Bavaria. This doesn't work anymore. We have very few priests for huge areas. People do not go where they are supposed to go, where they are registered. People go where they want to go, and they pick out places. They don't pick out territories. They go to shrines, and they go to monasteries. And so we think, in a way, it is these places, these monasteries conceived as places that are, for many people, a place of hope, a place where they attach their faith to, where they hope for consolation, shared Christian life, good experience, celebration of the sacraments, maybe even seeing somebody who gives a good example how to live. It sometimes happens in monasteries. So all of this, I think, marks out those monasteries as places, and we want to celebrate that aspect of it. I've taken a lot of inspiration from Paul VI, who in 1964, when he reconsecrated the destroyed Abbey of Monte Cassino, when he reconsecrated the church, issued the letter Pacis Nuncius, Messenger of Peace, in which he declared St Benedict the principal patron saint of Europe. And in that letter, he rather beautifully, for me really touchingly, described the dimensions how the disciples of St. Benedict have created Western civilization, a new way of living together. And he said, and they did so with the cross, the book, and the plough. The cross, that is faith and evangelization. The book, that is culture and education. I mean, we are here at Worth Abbey School. We are at a place where this educational contribution of the Benedictines is lived to this very day. And he speaks about how that really helped to shape Europe in a new way. And finally, the plough. And that's not just in homage to the labora part of ora et labora, the work ethic of the Benedictines. It's also a statement on progress, of transforming the world, of really making Europe arable, making it fruitful, making the earth, making creation possibly even a little bit more complete than it was already conceived by its creator. And so these three dimensions of a very spiritual one, but the others are not unspiritual, of education and culture and of material civilization that have really helped to shape Europe the way we see it now, were presented beautifully by Paul VI. I think this will be part of our thinking about the Jubilee, of what we want to celebrate, but also what we want to develop in view of the future. I have to be careful, you know where to walk here. 529. It was not it was an exciting and difficult time. I always have to laugh. I think in English you call it the barbarian invasions. The German term is quite different. The German term for this is die Völkerwanderung. The hike, or the, what you say, hiking. The hike of the ramble of the peoples. And I think you have to look at it from an Italian perspective to arrive at the barbarian invasions. But that is, of course, Benedict's perspective. It's an Italian perspective. The old Roman Empire was collapsing. Had already collapsed. These barbarian peoples, these Germanic peoples, really, which are, I mean, here I can say our ancestors, were all over the place and slowly emerging as new carriers of structure, of political structure and so on. But all this was combined with incredible amounts of suffering and violence, wars, continuous wars for several centuries. And in the midst of all of this, St. Benedict creates a monastery. Not just as a refuge, not just as a place where you can withdraw from all that turmoil and violence, but as a place which, maybe not intentionally, but factually then, starts to transform this emerging world, or rather starts to shape this newly emerging world, which is a civilization based on a shared faith, based on Christianity, and that gradually becomes what we have come to appreciate as European Western civilization. And I think, we are living in an incredible period of rupture right now, of disruption, and some people say transformation, but sometimes it feels more like just a complete break of, we do not know what many things will look like in 20 years. The world order in terms of war and peace, even the world economic order is being shaken up profoundly, almost as we speak. There is the challenge of global warming that will change the way how we live utterly if we are able to survive. There is artificial intelligence bringing in a new way of dealing with so many aspects of economic life, of learning, of relating, of writing, of producing. And we do not yet know where this will take us. We only realize we are really standing at the threshold of a world that will be massively different from what we are used to. And that is not dissimilar to what St. Benedict lived in his time, I think. And I'm not sure that Benedictine monastery will have quite the same impact which Benedict had 1500 years ago, but there must be something, there must be a contribution which, out of that heritage we have, we can make, both for our church, but possibly even for our society, as we are facing these enormous transformations. And that'll be an interesting topic to develop as well in the course of our Jubilee reflections. 529, I want to mention that is kind of a signal date in a small way. The foundation of Monte Cassino in 529, according to the traditional chronology, coincides with the closing of the Platonic Academy in Athens, a venerable institution that had been going for almost 1,000 years. That was the academy established by Plato, and that had been an important school for almost 1,000 years. But in 529, the Christian emperor Justinian thought, time's up for this kind of learning now, we don't need that anymore. He closed the Platonic Academy in Athens. He didn't transfer things to Monte Cassino, but the early modern historians who looked at this said, well, but it's not a coincidence. Monte Cassino, the cradle of Benedictine monasticism, that did become, in a symbolic way at least, an expression of this new way of learning. That's now Christian learning. It's sort of happening within a Christian worldview. And that's where the transmission of the learning of the ancients continues. And as we know, the manuscripts, what we know of the ancient world, to a large extent was transmitted through the scriptoria of the monasteries, until a few hundred years later that way of learning, the culture of learning, migrated to cathedral schools and then to the universities. But the monasteries for several centuries almost held the monopoly for cultivating the knowledge of the ancients and at the same time creating new ways of knowledge. The whole system of liberal arts, I think Oxford and Cambridge still call their degrees BAs and MAs, Masters of Arts, goes back basically to this late antiquity and then early medieval system of learning devised and transmitted to a large extent in our monasteries. So that's very interesting for places, I think, like Worth, and certainly like St Anselmo, where we do educate, where we do run universities. We really have to think what will be the way of transmitting knowledge and developing wisdom, if you like, that works in the 21st century in the face of all those challenges that I've mentioned earlier. And this 5 to 9 date for me is a signal for encouraging us to do that boldly. Well, that's more or less what I wanted to share with you, the elements that animate me when I think and reflect about this Jubilee. This is a study day, so I throw this out to you. I know that these methods which Adam has foreseen now for us to use the following hours, I've been a few times through processes done like that, can become extremely powerful. And my great hope is that this being, you being who you are, the Benedictines and friends of Benedictines and people who are inspired by St Benedict from the British Isles, I'm very careful here. No, sorry, West. From the British Isles. That you come up with great ways of making this alive and come to life here for British Isles. But also I have to admit, I've been doing this, I've been giving this kind of start speech now about 20 times. It's quite often in French, which is pretty difficult, I can tell you. But this is by far the most interesting, the most diverse group that I'm speaking to, and where I really think there will be a creative outburst here that will not only animate what you can do in the next 4 years here in British Isles, but I'm pretty sure I get to go home with lots of stuff in my bag, with ideas and themes that we can also develop in Rome and make useful for others as well. So I've now talked a lot, but now I'll become a listener here in that process and really look forward to picking up what your brain and your souls resonate with when it comes to this Jubilee. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.